Welcome to the Practice Recordings Organization tutorial. In this tutorial, you will learn how to import your recordings into iTunes, add descriptive labels to your recordings so they are easy to locate, organize your recordings so you can locate them quickly. You'll also learn how to add your recordings to your iPod, iPad, or iPhone. You will learn how to set up iTunes to easily see all of your recordings. And you will learn how to set your recordings so that you can pick up where you left off listening to a recording. Because every recorder is different, we can't show you here how to transfer your recordings from your particular recorder to your computer. If you don't know how to do this, you can send an email to bkayne@gmail.com. That's bkayne@gmail.com with the make and model of your recording, and we will send you instructions for how to transfer recordings from your recorder to your computer. So to start, we're going to show you how to transfer recordings from our recorder to our computer. Our recorder happens to be a Sony recorder, and the way we connect it is with a USB cable. One end connects to the recorder, and one end connects to the USB port on our computer. A lot of recorders work by using a USB cable to connect them to your computer. So you can first start out by just trying to connect yours with a USB cable to your computer and see if it shows up like mine does. So I've just connected my USB cable, and I'm now going to open up a Finder window. And you can see mine shows up under Devices, and mine's called IC Recorder. My recorder has a folder called Voice, and then these series of folders, but I know that there are these first 4 recordings that I know I want to bring onto my computer and put into iTunes, so I'm going to grab them all and just drag them all to my desktop. So now I'm going to launch iTunes, and I'm going to set up iTunes in a way that I find easiest to organize my recordings. And you can set yours up any way you like, but if you do it in this way, you'll be able to follow along as I set mine up. So what I'd first do is I go up to the View menu and I select As a List, go back up to the View menu, go to Column Browser. Now I already have my column browser showing, but if it isn't, you would go to View, Column Browser, Show Column Browser. And the last thing I want to do is I want to add a column here that allows me to see the most recent recordings I've added to iTunes. So I'm going to go back up to the View menu, View Options, and select Date Added. And what this allows me to do is see which are the most recent things I've brought in, and when you have a lot of recordings in here, this is really helpful. So you can see it's added this column here, Date Added, and I'm just going to select and drag this over so we can see it easily. So now I see name, artist, album, date added. And if I click on this, you can see it sorts this column so that the most recent recordings are showing. So I'm just going to hide this for a second. Now the next thing to do is to bring your recordings into iTunes, which is pretty simple. All you do is select them all. You can do them one by one or all the time, and just drag them right onto your iTunes icon. And I'm going to bring up iTunes again, and you can see that there's some new recordings here. They have these names that my recorder just numbers, and then an artist, my recording, and then you can see by the date added, I'm sorting by this column, so you see today's date for the 4 recordings I just brought in. So the first thing I'm going to do is something called bulk editing, which is going to allow me to apply the same attributes to multiple recordings. So I'm going to click and select these 4 new recordings. I'm going to go up to the File menu and select Get Info. It's going to ask me if I want to edit information for multiple items. I'm going to say yes. And this window comes up. And what this is going to allow us to do is that any information I apply here is going to be put automatically on all the new recordings I've selected. And so I'm just going to use my little fictitious name here for my artist. I'm going to put in John Smith. I'm going to put in the year. I'm going to put in the same name for the album artist. And there's only one other thing we're going to set here, and that is in the Options tab. And there's a little selection here called Remember Position. And I'm going to select that and choose Yes, and click OK. And what that does is that if I'm in the middle of listening to a recording and I need to stop and take a phone call if I'm on my iPhone or do something else, that the next time I go back to that recording, it's going to remember where I stopped. So the next thing I do is that I double-click on each of the individual recordings to listen to it long enough to determine what recording it's for. And so we're just going to pretend I did that, and then I'm going to go in and say, well, I listened to this one, and it was a Reflective Listening Buddies call. I like to put the date of mine, which helps me find them a little bit easier. See, it already has my artist and my album artist and my year. And then the other thing I do to help organize them is I create albums that help me kind of separate the different types of recordings I do. And so since this is a Reflective Listening Buddies call, I'm going to put it in that album. And then the first time you do that, it'll just create that album. And when you start to type it in after you've done the first one, iTunes will attempt to auto-complete whatever that album name is. So I've got a name, I've got my artist name, and I've got an album. That's all I need to do for that one. So I'm just going to go through and do these other three. And let's say this was the Resistance Email Class 3. I'm going to give it the album Resistance Email Class and click OK. Go ahead and do this one. I'm going to say this was a love letter from the mentor. And then I have a album I just call Practice Recordings for kind of general things. And let's do one more. And let's say this was also from the Resistance Email Class 8. And then I'll put it in the album Resistance Email Class. So now you can see in the list here, I now have the names that are associated with them. And if you look over here in albums, I have my artist, which is me, and then I have the 4 different things or albums. And so if I look at Resistance Email Class, my new class is in there. My Reflective Listening Buddies call, I can see the new one that I put is in there as well. Now, if you just use iTunes to listen to your recordings, you're done at this point. You've brought your recordings into iTunes, created an organization for them, and named them to identify them. However, if you do want to transfer these onto an iPod, iPad, iPhone, any kind of iDevice, you will want to connect your device to your computer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my iPod Shuffle to my computer. And in just a second, it's going to show up here in the sidebar of iTunes. So under Devices, we now have iPod Shuffle. And we have all these recordings. Now, there are a couple of steps you need to do to get your recordings into your device. The first thing you need to do is create a playlist where you keep all the different items you want to transfer onto your recording. So we're going to go to File Menu, New Playlist. I'm just going to call mine Practice Recordings. I'm going to go back to Music. And let's say that I want all of my recordings on here. I would just select my name, click All, and then you can select all of these recordings and drag them on right into the Practice Recordings playlist. If you want to do them one by one, you can just grab them one by one and drag them in like that. But you can just drag them all. Select them all and drag them all in there. Now when I click on the playlists, Practice Recordings, you see all of my recordings are now in here. Now there's one more step to actually get them onto your iPod or iShuffle or whatever you got. You need to click on your device, click on the Music section, And then here is where you tell it which of your playlists or what part of your library you want to put onto your device. Now yours might already be selected like this, in which case you would see your new playlist, check it, and then click Apply. It could be that you've never synced anything to your device and it might look like this. So you would just click Sync Music. Now you have two choices here. One is selected playlists, artists, albums, and genres, and one is entire music library. I think for most people it's probably easiest to do the selected playlists. That way you can put exactly what you want onto your recorder. So you just selected playlists, practice recordings, and click Apply. And you can see up here it's starting to sync my music onto my iPod. There's a little signal. When this stops spinning over here, we know we're done. Now we can open up our iDevice here, click on Practice Recordings. Now this shows us exactly what's on our device. Now there's one other slightly more advanced way to label your recordings so that they automatically end up in the playlist. And the way to do that is to create something called a smart playlist. And so you would go to the File menu, select New Smart Playlist. We're going to say we want to match the following rule and choose grouping. And we're going to say grouping is, and I'm going to say automatic sync. Now you could say anything here. You can make up any word that makes sense to you. And I'm going to click OK. So it's just create new smart playlist, match the following rule, grouping is automatic sync. And you can see now that there's a new playlist here called automatic sync, but there's nothing in it. Let's go back up to our music. And so the way that you would get recordings onto this is that when you're going through that first process of labeling your recordings, you would add one more piece of information. So I'm going to click on just one of these here and say File, Get Info. And I'm going to call the grouping, I'm going to label all the recordings that I want to end up in that playlist automatic sync. Now I haven't dragged it onto there, but if I click on the playlist now, you'll see that that recording is now here. And I can do that with all mine. You can do them all at once like we did before. You can select them all, select Get Info, confirm that you want to do it for multiple items, and in the grouping just write automatic sync. Click OK. And if I go back to automatic sync, they're all there. And then you'd also have to remember that we haven't yet told iTunes to put this playlist on our device. So we're going to click on iPod Shuffle, select automatic sync, and click Apply. And now it's going to add them all there. Now one nice thing about the way iTunes works is that if you have the same recording in multiple playlists, or if you have multiple versions of each recording in the same playlist, it's only going to store one of those on the actual device, and so it doesn't take up any extra room. Anytime if you've added new recordings into a playlist, and if your device is already connected to your computer, you're just going to need to manually tell it to sync again. iTunes is usually set so that when you plug a device into your computer, it'll automatically resync and update any things that's changed in your playlist. But if your device is already connected to your computer, you're going to need to tell it to sync it again. So you just click on your device again, click sync, and you're done. So that's it. Hope that was helpful. Have a great day.